Hello, beautiful, and welcome to the Moms Talk Sex podcast with me, Mor Yelvington, your host. I'm so excited that you're here today because I have the amazing Stephanie here. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I'm so excited because this conversation is really going to share some light on some topics that we don't normally talk about. And so this is going to be a really big game changer for you. So, Stephanie, how about you introduce yourself and let us know what it is that you do out in the world?
Sure. Well, I was so right now I'm a love and life success coach. And yeah, so it's kind of a fun time to be here. But for 18 years, I was a health educator. And so I have kind of a little bit of a different perspective where I do work with clients and healing from unhealthy relationships. But I also have taught and been open talking about sex from like sixth grade all the way into 81. So because that's been my oldest client. So I know what kids have asked. I know what they're interested in asking about. And I know what some of the issues have that, especially if they don't get resolved, I know what they can carry into as well.
I love that. So maybe we can start from there. Maybe you can share a little bit about what it is that kids ask and how can we prevent it from becoming a trauma later on in life.
Okay, so one thing that I was completely amazed at all the time is the lack of women, girls, knowing their bodies.
Yeah.
No idea. And I will say too, the lack of girls knowing that oral sex could be for men and women. Like
Yeah.
that, it was like when we were in the higher grades and we're talking about sexually transmitted infections and how they can get pregnant and stuff like that. When I would say like oral sex, and they'd be like, "Oh, you mean for a guy?" And I'm like, "No, for a girl too." And they're like, they look at me like so confused, And they were like, "But I don't understand." And I worked in a low income school district. We had kids that were having babies, and so they didn't even know how to protect themselves from these unplanned pregnancies or STIs now or whatever else. But they didn't even know how their bodies work. So it's amazing how little knowledge is out there for women to know to even protect themselves. And I'll say too, the conversations that I had with young women about saying no to sexual advances were some of the similar ones I had with older people, with full blown adults, where they were afraid to speak up. They were afraid to say what was on their mind. They were afraid that they would be alone, that no one would want them, that they were going to be made fun of. And so there was this weird place of like, they didn't want to be a whore. They didn't want to be, they didn't want to go the opposite and be a prude. It was kind of like one of those things, but there was a lot of pressure because they were afraid to speak up for themselves.
Wow. Where do you think that comes from?
I think that it's much easier to talk about women as objects and men as the one to get to play with them, as opposed to women having our own voices. We're more like we're cute arm candy and what men want to feel good as having as their trophy, as opposed to us being the wonderful, independent, strong women that we are and having a mutual relationship, as opposed to, we're just a thing that you get to have when you are a successful guy. You get to have this wonderful, beautiful woman, and we don't have any wants or needs after that.
Wow. And it seems like that starts really young
And it
then.
does. It does. And I think it's even, I mean, I remember I had a student of mine, she was in seventh grade and she walked into class in like, I mean, and she was a gorgeous little girl. And I say little, she was like 4'10. So she was short. She's a little tiny girl wearing this very tight, very revealing outfit. And I said, sweetheart, you got to go change. Like I normally am not that person, but it was too much. It was like, even for me, I was like, oh, okay. But the parents came, the mom came, and the mom had the same outfit.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, and this is what it is. And she was a very smart girl. And so like the next day I was like, I'm sorry that I had to send you home. It just really wasn't appropriate for school, whatever. And she was basically like, well, my mom's boyfriend, basically likes this outfit. And it was on and on about mom had been, and what came out was out of a conversation was that mom was so obsessed with finding a man that mom was out partying all night long and dressing for men to be interested in her. And this little seventh grade girl was following, and you could see some of it going on, but the way she was flirting with other boys, the way she was trying to get attention, she was doing the same thing at a seventh grade level that her mom was doing as an adult.
Wow. It's just amazing to see how the trauma just goes from one generation to the next generation.
Well, and I would say to some of my students, because even at that point, I already started having some of my clients with, healing from toxic relationships. And I remember having a 17-year-old girl, and she was fighting herself about whether or not she should end this relationship with this guy. And I'm sitting down with her, and he's not showing up to things. He's not really showing interest, completely avoidant, not giving her, wanting everything for her to do everything for him in every sense of the word, but then not showing up for her in any way. But she was afraid to end it because she was so in love, and she was afraid that she wouldn't find anybody else. And I said, the thing is if we don't figure this out at 17, you're going to be doing this until you're 40, 50, 60, 70 years old. Like, this is, and I see it again, like, and adult women where we've have this piece of us that's missing since the time we were small children. It doesn't heal. And like, what beautiful gift we could give ourselves if we could feel confident, feel good about ourselves, so that we had a whole life feeling empowered, feeling strong, being able to use our voice, being able to say, no, I'm not good with that, you should do this instead, or whatever those things are, and finding partners that are going to be the right fit for us in every sense of the word.
So what do you think that missing piece is? Like, why do you think we have that?
I think a lot of women, I would say, and it's between, we might have confidence, but we don't have self-esteem. And I think there's this thing of, we have been taught as women to hate our bodies and hate other women's bodies. So
Yeah.
instead of looking yourself and saying, like, damn, look, I mean, I was saying about this the other day. I was like, I wish I looked as fat as I did. The first time I thought I looked fat when I was like 12.
Yes.
Well, why were we 12 thinking we looked fat? Like, what, why? And that's because society has, like, if you don't look a certain way, you aren't going to be wanted. And I grew up, my mom was French, and I don't know if it's a French culture, it's culture in general, but that was my mom. So, but what I got from her was, men are not going to be attracted to you if you don't look a certain way. And she'd compare my weight to hers and tell me that I was already heavier than her and I shouldn't be. Well, I had more my dad's body. I'm a muscular person. I exercise. Even then I was exercising. She's more petite. We had different body types. But the way she was talking was that I was not very attractive. And so when I started to have relationship issues, my mind went to, it's because I'm not attractive enough. It's because I don't look a certain way. Instead of, I have relationship issues because I learned toxicity from my parents growing up of what relationships were, as opposed to, it's because of what I look like. And so I think we have these, you listen to songs, you watch Hollywood movies, things like that. There's always this certain look that women should have in order to look attractive. And if we don't, it's like we're put down, or the roles aren't as good, or whatever, the secondary roles for the people that don't look the way that Hollywood or musicians or whatever want you to come across. And so all of that stuff really starts to get into our head subconsciously, where we don't even realize we're doing it. And nowadays, with like Instagram and TikTok, you can have whatever filter you want. I mean, it makes it even worse for us.
Yeah, because you don't even know what's real and what's not real. And it's just like, oh, you don't like your body? Just change the filter or change your sex, become a man, right? Like, you could do anything, I feel like, in order to not be who you actually came here to be and what you came here to do.
Well, and and it's interesting is that, I have clients that have been through breast cancer, and they're like, I'm never going to be wanted again. I have one breast, or I've had to have them both removed, or I've had other things go on. And I've had other friends that have had cancer, and they're like, honestly, it doesn't matter. They will still be interested. That is not a problem at all. But we get into our own heads, especially when we're getting older and our bodies have changed and we've had children, and all those things that are going on. Again, when we compare ourselves to what TV shows us, that, and Instagram and all that stuff shows us could be, we feel like that's not attractive. But again, it tends to be a bit more. Now, there's not that there's not men that are, extra with that, but it almost is like we do that. We're the hardest on ourselves.
Yeah.
And also, and to each other at times. One of the biggest things for my healing was reconnecting with women and really finding my tribe of women that I could connect with and feel safe with. Because we're like, the more we're not in competition with each other, the more we can look at someone and be like, you're beautiful, you're amazing, you're smart, all those things. We're not just doing it for that other person, we're doing it for ourselves as well. As like, when we're not judgy on other people, we also tend to be less judgy on ourselves.
Right. That is so true. So why do you think it is that after giving birth, people don't want to have as much sex anymore?
I think for a lot of people, I mean, for one, it's your body changes, and it's like, okay, well, I used to not have this pouch, or, my body just doesn't look the same or whatever. But I really just think it's also just fatigue. The biggest thing that I hear people talk about is they're like, oh, I feel so old. I'm so tired. And I'm like, when's the last time you slept through the nights? When's the last time you were able to work out? When's the last time you had a green smoothie, or to make sure that you're getting the right nutrition? I remember after I had my son, I was like, I luckily went right back to my original weight, which felt amazing. It didn't work as quickly for my second, but for my first one. But I realized, like, I went to the doctor and they're like, okay, you're eating too much salt. And I was like, salt? I'm like, that's never been a problem for me. And then I realized, like, I literally am not eating. I'm just grabbing handfuls of pretzels, shoving them in my face to have some kind of substance. And then I'm going along to the next thing. You're exhausted when you haven't
Mhm.
slept in months.
Right. Yeah.
You're like, my fetish is to sleep, not even to.
Yes.
And
So what?
there's less time too, like beforehand when you're just in the lovey-dovey phase, you could be like, "Ooh, let's spend all this time and rub each other and put on cool music and do all sorts of things." But after, you're like, baby's asleep. Can we do this as quickly as possible? What do we have to do? So it's like, this feels good if I touch here. This good's good here, and you're like poking around, like, okay, we're done, good. You get it done really fast. And then as time goes on, you're like, it becomes the norm that you're like, you get it over with, and that's not, there's no connection there. There's no, like, that the foreplay, which is not just like it's where you're touching, it's how you're interacting with each other. How are you spending time with each other? Because I
Right.
think, especially for women, it is that need to have that connection. And when you're busy being pulled in different directions, not only are you tired, but sometimes there's just no time to connect with your significant other, where you don't want to have sex with a stranger because, like, you guys are like living different lives while you're taking care of the child, if that's what you're doing, and your partner is at work doing something else, or vice versa. However it is, my first child, I went to work and my husband stayed home. It just worked better with what we were doing for a living. And I mean, you get home and you're exhausted. Like,
Yeah.
he's wanting to trade off baby, and I'm like, I am exhausted from work. I'll do it, but you don't feel like doing much of anything else.
Yeah. It's so true. And so, as a success coach, like, what do you tell couples when they get to that point? Because even I feel like if that starts when you're having a baby and you don't kind of overcome it, when your kids get older, you're in that place where you're still so disconnected. Like, how do you even find yourself back to each other?
Yeah, it will start to get really bad. I think an issue that a lot of people have is because women are often made to feel like if we are not in a relationship, then something is wrong with us. And
Mm,
so we way too quickly get serious with someone. And sometimes it's like, well, we're having sex with them, so we don't want to be seen as something negative, what we were kind of saying before. So, like, well, I just want to be with this one person. And so it makes sense to get married. And so we kind of just rush into these relationships. Again, it's that external pressure of feeling like we have to be in that relationship. And so we don't really truly know ourselves. We've been trained to focus on other people. And so, like, one of the things that I'll tell clients is, like, when you do start dating again, especially if you've had an unhealthy relationship, is you're dating for educational purposes to see what you are interested in, what fits for you, but you're also dating to see who's a good fit for you. When we're younger, we do a lot of who can I prove myself to for them to pick me. And when you do that, you're not allowing yourself to you be the chooser. You be the one to be like, I know who I am and what I want, and I'm going to go out there and look for what it is that I want that will be good for us. Because how can we know ourselves when we haven't taken the time to do that? So I think that's a big issue. I think that it's the fact that we don't really know ourselves. A lot of us don't really find partners that are the right fit for us. Sometimes we do, and then you grow in different directions. You don't take that time to date each other. You don't take that time to spend with each other, to help each other with just like family chores, helping each other, like being a real team, instead of being one person does all the work and the other one sits around on their ass. Like, obviously, I'm not going to be in the mood if you're tired all the time because one person is doing all the work, So, I mean, there's a lot of different things, but I think that if you are not communicating, number one, if you are avoiding big conversations because you're being passive, or you get to a point where you're just annoyed and irritated all the time at your significant other, how is that going to be fruitful for sex? you know?
Yeah. So how do you recommend overcoming that, right? Like if you are feeling so resentful at this point because you haven't spoken your truth, but you do want to rekindle this relationship. You want to have more sex. You want to have more intimacy. How can somebody go about it doing
So, I mean, for me, one of the things I would definitely recommend is like, so how can you, sometimes it's less just like writing down what your needs are. Sometimes that's what it's like, you yourself seeing what those needs are and being really honest. Like it's okay if your needs are different. It's okay if there's like a certain way you want to be touched, if there's certain times of day that you would rather have sex, if there, whatever it is, say what those things are, but also be open to hear your partner say those things. I think that's, if we're going to be open and honest, we got to be ready for our partner to be open and honest. So I think that that's part of it. But even before then, how are you going to reconnect? If you like to go to concerts together when you were first dating and things were really great, well, when's the last time you went to a concert? When's the last time you went to dinner, just the two of you? When's the last time you did a little trip? And I know sometimes it's hard. I don't have family near me either. And I know, date nights can be expensive. But like, what if you met up for lunch sometimes and that was your time to connect? What if there's, what if, because I have a neighbor, like I can let the kids hang out with my neighbor and then we can go do something, which makes it a little bit easier. And so, like, those kind of things, like, how are some ways that you can connect? Can you connect by simply just going by each other and like tapping each other or just giving each other a hug as you walk by each other? Those little mini connections throughout is important. And then, like, sometimes it's just Friday night at 5 o'clock, we're having a glass of wine together and we're going to just talk about you and I. Let the kids go watch television, grab pizza, throw it in the oven. And this is your chance to sit and hang out with just you. And it's got to be for an hour. Like, pick a time that, like, we're going to hang out for an hour. Well, we're going to get some cheese and some wine and hang out, or whatever your thing is. And we're going to hang out and just reconnect with each other. But set those up, because I'm sure, just like everybody else, for me, all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, it's been like 3 months since we've been on a date. Because if you haven't scheduled it in, life
that?
just goes by like crazy as a mom, then you just don't have time.
So true. So I'm curious, can you speak from a medical perspective on the idea that women don't want as much sex as men do? Do you feel like that's accurate?
Okay, so for me, I would 100% say no. I'm super horny, and I know that that's not true at all for me. I think that there's a lot of women that I'm friends with personally, and even clients that I have that want to have more sex, but they're afraid to speak up, and they are tired. They are not connecting with their significant others. And like I said to them, if you don't want to be intimate with your significant other, then there are other problems. So, like, let's look at what those problems are. Let's figure that out. Because if you're just roommates, then where's the marriage? Like, and sometimes it's like we're not even roommates. We don't even like each other. Okay, well
Oh,
then why are you still married? Like, that's a horrible life to live. Your whole, however much longer you have on this earth, you're just going to live together without ever having sex and just hate each other forever. Like, that sounds awful.
awful.
So, like, what are you going to do together to reconnect on that? So no, I 100% do not think that, and from a medical perspective, that women don't like to have sex. I think that, again, I think that maybe we've been told that we shouldn't want to have sex as much, that it's the men that are always horny, but I 100% don't agree with that at all.
It's interesting you mentioned this because I realize, like, for my girlfriends in their 40s, it seems like the men are less interested or less horny, and the women, it's almost like the hormones, kind of shift. And so I was
Mhm.
curious, like, from a medical perspective, is there something you can say about that? Like, is there something we can do for the men to maybe help them get back in the game? I don't know. Is that the right
I
term?
mean, a lot of men are overweight. A lot of men have not been exercising. They are drinking too much alcohol. They're eating the wrong kind of food, and they're not getting erections. They're not.
Yeah.
They're having more, of estrogen in their bodies because of their overweight. When you're more overweight, you're producing more estrogen, so you're not going to be horny as much. So that's another issue. If they don't feel good in their own bodies, and again, when your circulation is not working right, of course you're not going to be able to get an erection. So I think that men have to be, and we have to be careful because we don't want them to feel emasculated or feel like there's a problem with them, but to be able to say, like, hey, maybe we can go together, or if you feel comfortable, we can set up an appointment for you to speak to your doctor about why you're not feeling more aroused or why you're not able to get and keep an erection or whatever those things are. A lot of the times it could be either just mental, where they're so like just fixated on whether or not, they don't look the same, or their performance isn't going to be as long, or whatever it is. Sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's really just health. And if it's a health issue that like, so what do we need to do? Again, exercise, workout, sleep more, all those things. Stress is a huge thing for all of us to feel, much less interested. So what are the things that we can do? And then, sometimes it's like, how about we have sex without having sex? Like maybe no penetration. Maybe there's just connection and touching and kissing and things like that, where there's no pressure to actually be able to have sex. And I think, and women, every women I talk to, when they've already gone through menopause, they feel less worried about getting pregnant. So that's why they're like, woo, yay, I can do whatever I want and not be worried about consequences, so
Right.
they're a little bit more open to it, while the men are just, their prime has started to go downhill. So we have to be, again, communication. We have to be able to, if you can't talk to your partner about like intimate things like sex, that like, what are you doing with your partner? Like you should be able to have all of these conversations with them. And it is sad how many of us can't. And
Yeah.
that's really what it comes down to. Why are we not open about all of the things that we're thinking about with our partners?
Right. So what would it take really? What would it take for you listening to be able to talk about this stuff with your partner and to really step into that and to really reclaim that power of you?
Yeah. And whatever your upbringing is, like I grew up in a very conservative Christian household. So, that's could be your upbringing, where you're like, well, we don't talk about it. And if we don't talk about any problems, we don't go to the doctors about any of these issues, whatever. That was then. This is
Yeah.
now. So no one's listening to you. You don't have to worry about getting in trouble from your parents. All those years you were told you're not allowed. None of that is true anymore. So go ahead and go ask the questions to your doctor. Find out, like, is there not enough lubrication anymore? Is it because there's not enough foreplay, or are you just, because you're going through menopause, you're not getting enough? Like, what's going on for you? And be open and honest to find out what it is, because it's not weird to have issues related to sex. In fact, it is so common. In fact, I was speaking to someone, she was a pelvic floor professional. And, sometimes just as simple as like being able to relax into it. But because they've had sexual trauma, they've had other things. So if it's sexual trauma that makes you not interested, maybe you've had bad experiences, go speak to a therapist. Get that support. And maybe you're someone that just doesn't really like to have sex. That's okay too. If that's not your thing, it's going to be a problem if you used to and now you don't, and now your significant other is like, what happened? Then I would also wonder, like, is there something else going on psychologically or physically? But for those of you who are saying, I would like to, there's just XYZ going on, go to the right professionals to talk you through it so that they can figure out what's going on and fix it.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much. This has been so enlightening. So, our listeners want to find more about you and what you do. How can they find you and reach you?
Sure. So if you would like to go over to beinglovedshouldn'thurt.com, I actually have some courses that you can get. I also have a private Facebook group, all things to support women who are maybe in the I'm thinking this relationship isn't working for me, all the way to the post, I left and now I don't know who I am or what I want for myself, or I'm dating and I don't ever want to be in a bad relationship again. We can help you really reclaim who you are, rebuild and heal, so that you have a life that you're excited to wake up to every day. Feel free to set up a time with me too. I have no problem just hopping on a call and chatting if I can give you some extra, like a blueprint to help you through.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here, for your time, for your expertise and your knowledge. I really appreciate it. And if you guys have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section. We'll make sure to answer your questions and support you on your healing journey. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch in with you next week. Bye.